The following Pharma Essentia podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and cannot be considered as medical advice. Please speak to a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Kay.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Kay.
Josh, hello.
Josh, hello instead of hello, Josh. We're mixing things up today.
Gotta keep it fresh, Josh.
Wow, I really couldn't have said it better myself. I'm going to do it anyway because it feels wrong starting an episode without our usual greeting. Hey, Kay.
Hi, Josh.
Now, I recognize those polite introductions we just heard.
You sure do. That was us from 3 of our previous episodes.
Cute. We sound so young and spry.
Don't we?
But why are we listening to ourselves again?
As we head into the new year, we here at the PV Pod wanted to do a recap of all 10 of our incredible episodes. Our favorite guests, insights, advice, information, and more.
Our favorite bits? We have to do a highlight reel of our favorite bits.
Maybe if we have time at the end.
Yes!
All that and more. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode of the PV Pod.
The PV Pod.
The PV Pod, Stories from the Marrow.
This is trippy. I'm getting whiplash.
A podcast about
Polycythemia vera. Was I that bad at pronouncing this?
Brought to you by Pharma Essentia.
Whew, thanks, Pharma Essentia.
I can't believe it's already been 10 episodes of the PV Pod.
I know. It's gone by really fast.
And we've gotten to meet so many incredible guests along the way.
Polycythemia vera is a myeloproliferative neoplasm.
Dr. Bose, all the way from episode 1.
My name is Aaron Gerds. I'm an associate professor of medicine at the Cleveland Clinic Taussig Cancer Institute.
And Dr. Gerds, who talked to us about setting treatment goals in episode 6.
Aside from doctors, we've also gotten to talk to some pretty inspiring people living with PV.
My name is Nick Napolitano.
I'm Patty Montsleone, and I have polycythemia vera.
Oh, and we talked to Patty's husband, Joe. I loved that conversation. They were so supportive of each other.
You know, it's all about your loved one. You really have to be aware and cognizant of how your loved one feels.
And Gary Linehan, who took us all the way to the Alps.
I'm an avid hiker, and that's why we're here to talk about the hike on Mont Blanc today.
Our conversation with advocates have been really special, like David Wallace from episode 4.
I'm the publisher, PV reporter, and a patient leader in the NPN community.
It really has been an incredible and informative year.
Agreed. So where do we start now? There's so much to go over. It's like taking a bite out of a sandwich that's really good, but like way too big for your mouth. Wait, that reminds me of the sandwich I had this weekend. You will not believe what was in this thing.
Before we get too off track, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with our year in review right after this quick break.
So you're learning about PV on the PV Pod, Stories from the Marrow. Now get ready to take the next steps on your PV journey with What's Next PV, an educational site on everything polycythemia vera.
Knowing what's next can help inform the decisions you and your doctor make about the future and is important to your health. What's Next PV can help you understand test results, set goals for the management of your PV, and make a plan to advocate for yourself. Check out www.whatsnextpv.com to learn more.
And we're back.
Thanks for sticking around.
Okay, let's get into it. I mean, how can we cover this whole season in just one episode?
So I'd like to do a crash course, starting from the very beginning and combining everyone's answers. This will be a really comprehensive 20 minutes.
All right, so if I had to guess, I bet we're starting with, what is PV?
You got it. First, Dr. Reeves from our most recent encyclopedia episode.
Polycythemia vera is a type of chronic blood cancer called a myeloproliferative neoplasm.
A myeloproliferative neoplasm,
Or MPN.
That occurs when a blood stem cell develops a mutation in a gene called JAK2.
this JAK2 mutation, or Janus kinase 2.
I said, Mike, what's a JAK2 mutation, what does that mean?
The JAK2 mutation,
which is present in over 95% of patients with polycythemia vera,
allows for overproduction
And overproduction
of blood cells,
of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So it's not just red blood cells, as sometimes is the notion. It is white cells, platelets as well.
even when the body didn't ask for them.
So polycythemia vera is a myeloproliferative neoplasm
which is an umbrella of various blood cancers
that occurs from a genetic mutation on the JAK2 gene in the bone marrow.
resulting in an overproduction of blood cells.
Red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets.
What kind of symptoms are we looking at here?
So it definitely itching.
Itching, body aches.
Itching, particularly after a hot bath or shower, which we call aquagenic pruritus.
I would feel this burning sensation in my toes, and when I would take showers, the top of my feet would itch.
There can be erythromelalgia, which is pain and burning in the hands and feet.
And then I think back, knowing what I know now, to high school and even younger, and having blurry vision and headaches and nausea coming at me all at the same time.
Headaches can happen, often migraine-type headaches.
PV can be kind of tricky and sneaky with fatigue and headaches and stuff.
Pain, the inability to think clearly, huge fatigue.
And fatigue.
Fatigue, feeling tired.
I felt horrible. I felt really tired and I was anemic and just didn't feel good.
Itching and fatigues and headaches.
Oh my!
Oh my is right. It's hard to imagine this level of discomfort and exhaustion. And remind me, what's the risk associated with PV? You're producing too many blood cells, you're feeling itchy and tired and getting migraines. Then what?
A big concern with these patients is that they can develop blood clots.
Most serious events that we see happen with polycythemia vera, namely blood clots,
That these blood clots can be in arteries,
The risk of thrombosis,
deep vein thrombosis or DVT.
a blood clot can be a relatively minor one, or it could be something life-threatening, such as a heart attack or a stroke or a pulmonary embolism.
Strokes or heart attacks.
I could possibly have a heart attack or stroke.
And about 1 in 5 individuals with PV will have a blood clot at or before their PV diagnosis, and still about 25% will have a blood clot even after their PV diagnosis.
Got it. Major concern with the overproduction of blood cells is an increased risk for heart attacks, stroke, and pulmonary embolisms.
Right, and it's a progressive cancer.
It does transform, it does progress.
It is a progressive disease.
In episode 7, we talked all about this with Dr. Tremblay.
someone who doesn't have a blood clot and then develops a blood clot, or someone who has a blood clot and develops more blood clots, I would define that as someone who may be progressing.
With Dr. Tremblay, we also discussed the potential for PV to transform.
The most clear example is when polycythemia vera turns into a different disease, such as myelofibrosis,
A different blood cancer.
where there's scarring of the bone marrow, and instead of high red blood cell counts, there can be low red blood cell counts or low counts and more significant symptoms. Or an even more aggressive version called acute myeloid leukemia or MPN blast phase.
And overwhelmingly, patients want to, do whatever they can to slow down the progression of the disease, if not reverse it, right?
How quickly will it progress?
You just don't know how your course is going to progress.
All right, we've covered what PV is, common symptoms, progression, and transformation. Let's recap treatment. What does the treatment look like for PV?
I would say that our therapies are predominantly directed at reducing the risk of clotting or thrombosis rather than preventing those long-term outcomes. The goals of treatment are currently, although this is evolving, but I would say currently the goals still are minimizing or preventing, reducing the risk of thrombosis. So that kind of, I guess, is a nice segue from what we were just discussing.
That is a nice segue. So we're trying to slow progression to more serious blood clots to prevent serious events.
And treatment can look different for different patients.
There are options, right? Don't put yourself in a bubble that this is what I have to do. There are a lot of options out there.
I encourage patients to engage with their healthcare team to better understand their condition and what treatment options are available.
I'm on a really great FDA-approved drug that I'm doing well on.
In polycythemia vera, there's a process that we call therapeutic phlebotomy.
Repeated phlebotomies.
Oh God, I hated needles. I still hate needles.
Where we're removing blood to reduce the hemoglobin hematocrit to make the blood less thick.
But after doing that for about a year, that wasn't really working. My red blood cells counts were still going up. My hematocrit count was still going up. Platelets were still going up. So we had a very candid conversation about next steps. And she recommended a new sort of interferon.
So there are several treatment options, and it's important to discuss with your healthcare team what treatment options might be right for you.
And still, increased risk of thrombotic events, as well as the unknowns surrounding progression and transformation, are some of the reasons it can be so frustrating when people who are diagnosed with PV are told it's the good cancer.
When I was first diagnosed, I was told it's a blood disorder and, hey, it's a good one to have if you have to have one. And I'm thinking to myself, seriously?
Right. We touched on that earlier this season. People with PV often have their concerns and feelings ignored because of that dismissive idea that it's the good cancer to have.
Not a good thing. And, a lot of newly diagnosed patients are being told the same thing.
When in reality, any cancer diagnosis is overwhelming, to say the least.
It's normal to be depressed.
When they said the word cancer, I was honestly angry.
It's normal to be angry about the situation.
Because I think I take good care of myself my whole adult life. And I was just like, I had never been on any medications or anything like that. My cholesterol was low. I was really taken aback and I was very concerned.
And he just kind of went through, well, you could end up needing stem cell transplant, kind of giving me the worst case scenarios of the disease course. And I was like, oh. I was in the examining room by myself. He walks out and I just burst into tears.
Your mind skips ahead and what's to come. So you immediately go to the dark place, which is where I went to. Immediately went to how long am I going to live? Thinking that I didn't have much time left and just playing life's memories, right? Like skipping ahead to, graduations and weddings and just all the life's moments.
Realize that if you're just diagnosed, it's difficult, but things can get better once you get started on the right treatment plan and try to look at the bigger picture and a brighter future can very well be ahead.
Whoa, that was a little bit of a jump. Let's walk through how our guests got from anxiety and fear to optimism and perspective. I remember a lot of our guests offering some really good advice on how to cope with the PV diagnosis.
Here are some things Nick wished he heard when he was first diagnosed.
Knowing what I know now, right, that this is a long-term journey. Stating that up front. This is something that you could live long-term. Everybody is different, but you can live long-term with this. The best thing I ever did was share my story and get involved in the cause.
When I was diagnosed with PV in January of 2021, I decided that I would hike the Long Trail, which is a hike through Vermont. It's 273 miles. I decided to do it as a fundraiser for the NPN Association.
I sought help from the online community, and the online community, I kind of followed who are the people that are knowledgeable, who are people that are providing answers to other patients. And those are the people that I sought out for help with questions online. I found that as an extremely helpful resource. And so because of that help that I received, that was another driving force for me to create PV Reporter.
And I know that it's different for everybody, but I really struggled with this mentally in that first year. I internalized everything. And to get it out in the open and just talk about it, and I don't think my story is any great story versus someone else, but the act of getting it out of my brain and out in the open, and then the support that I received in telling the story was healing. That's not to be too dramatic about it, but it was very, very healing to me, and I loved how that felt.
Find your support network. Find other patients that have it.
I think going to a new community where we have more people involved in our lives and close friends, that's been a really good cope mechanism.
I've been very fortunate enough to make connections through the stuff that I've done in the MPN community doctors and patients.
There's a lot more people, a lot more engagement for us, and we have a really nice, supportive group of friends and community, and that's made such a difference.
My children have been a huge support. My friends, I got a few close friends that I hike with, and they've been great.
Across the board, we heard our guests emphasize the importance of community. Family members, attentive doctors, internet groups, even hiking buddies. When you're going through something like this, it's important to not be alone.
Speaking of that community, we also heard caregivers and some of our guests who are living with PV describe what their loved ones do to support them.
You really have to be aware and cognizant of how your loved one feels. Be aware of that she's going to the doctor today or she has an upcoming visit, and to check on her during and after.
My immediate family and my extended family and friends have rallied around the cause and have attended events, have contributed funds to my fundraising.
Even my primary care has told me that Jess is my biggest asset as far as my health, because she points out everything I need. She's my biggest advocate and biggest supporter. She's always been there, always. I think she knew something was wrong when my feet were burning and it wasn't athlete's foot. She was always like, you need to check that out, you need to check that out.
You take as much stress away from your loved one as you can. We found that I think the less stress that Patty has, the better results she has, and the better she feels. So, try to take all those stressful things away from her or your loved one.
We recently told my older son. We just felt like it was time, and he was sort of kind of involved in some of the things that we've done, and he started to ask some questions, and so we told him, and it was one of the best things that we've ever done. I mean, he was so smart. He asked me how I'm doing on occasion. He wants to know when I'm going to the doctor. It's just, I'm so proud of him. Once you discover this support system, I was so very scared to communicate. And it seems silly, but I think a lot of people are like this. But once you do, it just opens up so much support and love.
I guess I hadn't thought about it before, but it's kind of striking how similar the advice has been from all of our guests. Community, especially family, open communication, getting involved in the MPN space. I also remember Nick saying something special about being patient with the disease. I think it involved a sport.
This is a journey. I equate it to a baseball season.
Right, baseball with balls and bats and all that stuff.
You're a real sports guy, aren't you?
Hey, batter, swing batter.
I tell people this all the time, where there's 162 games in a baseball season. You cannot overreact to one loss, one win, right? You have to hang on for the journey of 162 games. The same thing with PV, right? This is a long journey. You're going to have good blood tests. You may have a string of good blood tests, and all of a sudden, randomly, you're going to have a bad one, and your numbers are spiked, and you're going to be like, why? And so you got to take it, look at it across time and not overreact to any one specific event, right? Your symptoms might be really bad for a while, and then they'll go away, right? Like I've had itching, and then itching went away, and it's like, well, why? And so you just learn to be patient with the disease and really not overreact to any one thing. So that's what I would say most. Just try and be patient, try and take it for what it is, and don't overreact to any one thing.
Right, now I remember why I loved this metaphor so much. Nick really emphasized the journey of living with PV. I just think that's such a great perspective to have.
If we're bringing up highlights, I'd like to pull some quotes from Gary. He had some of his own quotes.
That word cancer can be powerful if you let it, and I did for a little while.
Oh yeah, Gary quoted a poet for us, didn't he?
It's The Laughing Heart by Charles Bukowski. You can't beat death, but you can beat death in life. Sometimes. The more often you learn to do it, the more light there will be. Your life is your life. Know it while you have it. You are marvelous. The gods delight in you. It's just a great poem, and it speaks to me having PV to live it. I mean, it starts out, your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Be on the watch. There are ways out, and there is light somewhere. So even though, we may have a rare disease, we have blood cancer, there is light and there is a way out. And you got to find what your light is. Cancer may walk with you, but that doesn't define who you are.
Really good highlight, Kay.
That's definitely one of my favorite sections from the whole show.
Another highlight from Gary, what he ate while he was hiking Mont Blanc.
The Beaufort cheese in the French region was absolutely tremendous. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thoroughly enjoyed hot cocoa in Italy, which has to be eaten with a spoon.
I'm still thinking about hot chocolate. What an incredible season this has been.
And it's not over. We have one more episode left in season 1 of the PV Pod, and I am so excited to share it with you guys.
Oh, good. I wasn't really ready for it to end.
Thank you to all of our guests featured today. Dr. Bose, Dr. Tremblay, Dr. Reeves, Dr. Gerds, and patients Nick Napolitano, David Wallace, Gary Linehan, Patty Monteleone, and her husband Joe. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. See you next time. See you next time.
We'll see you next time.
On the PV Pod, Stories from the Marrow.
A podcast about polycythemia vera.
The PV Pod, Stories from the Marrow is produced by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media, and made possible thanks to our sponsor, Pharma Essentia. The PV Pod is hosted by me, Kay Vermeil, and my co-host, Josh Bragg. If you like the show, please share it with anyone for whom it might make a difference, and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'll see you next time.